It's the 13th day of the 2023 Israel-Hamas war. Nearly 2 weeks since Israelis woke up on that Saturday morning, October 7th, to a rocket barrage from Gaza and the terrifying attacks by Hamas terrorists, killing, burning, and kidnapping hundreds in several Gaza border communities in the towns of that area, Sderot, Ofakim, and Netivot, and then carrying out a massacre of more than 200 people at an outdoor music rave called Supernova, set in the fields next to Kibbutz Re'im. Hersh Goldberg-Polin, 23, is one of the Israelis who was at the event and who hasn't returned. He was last heard from just after 8 a.m. that Saturday morning when his parents, John Polin and Rachel Goldberg, received 2 brief text messages from him. "I love you," and "I'm sorry."
We just knew as hour and hour and hour went by and news started to pour out from this music festival of, this massive massacre that took place. It's terrifying.
Since then, it's been a nightmarish roller coaster of horror, dread, and action as John and Rachel tried to find out what they can about Hersh's whereabouts and do whatever they can to bring their boy home. This week on What Matters Now, it's Jessica Steinberg with Rachel Goldberg, mother of presumed Hamas captive Hersh Goldberg-Polin. I'm here with Rachel Goldberg, and we are in her daughter's bedroom in Jerusalem, and it has been 12 days since this nightmare has begun. And what's happening in the apartment, in John and Rachel's apartment, is that there is a hamal, a situation room. It is a room that is sometimes filled with the family and friends who are like family who have worked tirelessly for hours every day to do everything possible to get Hersh home, along with all the other confirmed Hamas hostages. There's been an intensive media blitz, many, many articles that listeners have certainly been reading, obviously plenty of TV as well, a lot in the States and a lot in Israel as well. And of course, also making very vital U.S. government connections. And that was something that began really as of the Saturday night when this all started unfolding. So the team has spent a lot of time gathering information from those who are near Hersh and survived. And Rachel, I'm wondering, what's one particular story or detail that stood out for you among all of the things that you were hearing and that were difficult to process, but gave you the information that you needed?
So something that comes to mind, when this very first started to unfold on Saturday morning, Shabbat morning, first there's just this primal terror that everybody goes through when you think your child is in danger. And in this case, it was very much validated that we knew something horrible had happened right where he was. He had sent us these very ominous texts at 8:11 in the morning. And we just knew as hour and hour and hour went by and news started to pour out from this music festival of, this massive massacre that took place. It's terrifying. So we weren't thinking beyond how do we find him? Where is he? And thank God we had this amazing group of people who came over and they were not coming over to hug us. They were coming over to work. And it was amazing that they were able to keep their heads when we were in a complete daze. And to the point where people, late Saturday night, when we still didn't know anything, we had 2 friends who went down one to Soroka and one to Barzilai to look through unidentified bodies to see if he was there. I mean, those are friends who, I don't even, the word friend doesn't describe what they were. And even on Sunday, when we went to they had set up this makeshift police department in Airport City for all the parents or family members of people who were searching for their loved ones. The idea of talking to the media or the press was like the last thing on our minds. And we did on Saturday night call the U.S. Embassy to tell them that a U.S. citizen is missing. But the real turning point of, we kept saying, we're not going to the press. Like, this is not a story. I mean, we were part of a story, but it wasn't, Hersh was a story.
Right.
So we were just panicked, sickened, did not go to sleep for sure for those first 48 hours, no sleep. And then our team had found this picture of the actual bomb shelter that Hersh and his friend Honor were in. And we were able, through some of the young people on the team and through Libby, through Hersh's sister, to start identifying some of the other people who were in that bomb shelter. Together. And so then we were able to start, this whiteboard of trying to figure out who could get that person's number. And one of Hersh's close friends, named Omer, was unbelievably helpful. And he's a real connector. And he was able to find the brother of the guy who was standing next to the girl. And finally, we spoke to eyewitnesses who were trapped under the dead bodies in the bomb shelter, who were also injured, but were alive, but they were pretending to be dead, thank God.
Right.
And they're the ones who witnessed Hersh being taken out of the bomb shelter. And it was heartbreaking for the team to have to tell us this, because John and I had just gone downstairs after 48 hours of no sleep, and we had seen the picture of the bomb shelter. So we thought, okay, thank God he's not laying in the field next to where everyone was killed at the music festival. He made it to a bomb shelter. Why hasn't he called us? Maybe he lost his phone in the shuffle. Maybe there's no reception down there. Whatever the case, we were, really trying to hope for the best. And John came downstairs and he said, the team wants to talk to us. And I thought, oh my gosh, if they're getting us, we already came downstairs. It's like 1 a.m. We've been up for almost 3 days now. It must be not good. And that's when our dear friend Rotem said, listen, I went back to the eyewitnesses that we spoke to say, because they had said to us, we were on the call with them. All of us were. We would sit around, with the phone on speaker in the middle, the whole team. And one of the witnesses had said he walked out. He was very calm. He wasn't, he didn't shout. He didn't cry, like nothing, but he had hurt his hand. She said, in Hebrew, about, I forget how she said, biyad. And so, Rotem said to her, was it, so it was just like he just hurt his hand. And she said, Lo zaya yoter me, זה לא היה קל, אבל הוא היה בסדר, הוא הלך, like she was
it wasn't a light injury. It wasn't such a big deal.
But he walked out, like it wasn't light, but he was able to walk. He didn't lose consciousness. So Rotem had ended up calling her back and the other two eyewitnesses. And they said, they didn't want to say, because we were on the call, that from the elbow, like somewhere near the elbow down, his arm had been blown off. And they hadn't wanted to tell us that. And of course, as soon as they tell us that, like, we get sick to our stomachs, and then we start to think the worst. And, immediately, and they said it's the left hand, and I'm left-handed and Hersh is left-handed. And I'm immediately just, it was just so, there was something about it that was so re-sickening from already a super sickening situation. I remember just feeling like the blood drain out of my face. And I just thought, he's probably bled out. Like, he probably got on that truck. Like, they had said he had tied some sort of tourniquet. But I'm thinking, you tie a tourniquet with one hand.
Right.
And how tight are you tying a tourniquet when, like, your arm's been blown off onto yourself?
Right.
And I just thought, and I even said it, I think he probably died, like, in the field. Like, as they were driving him, they probably, like, took him off the truck and he died in the field.
Right.
Like, it just, was this horrible, sickening feeling. And that was the turning point where, first of all, Rotem said to me, absolutely not. Do not lose hope. You cannot say that. like he's strong. They said he walked out. He had
tied
a
his own
tourniquet.
tourniquet.
You snapped out of it.
Right.
And then we decided, so first of all, then we didn't sleep again.
You didn't go to sleep that night, no.
And that night, more so, we said, that's it. We're going to every media outlet we can because time is of the essence and we want to save his life.
So that was a turning point.
Right. And so that was a real turning point. And that's when because everyone had been calling us those first 2 days, America had heard about what happened and Hersh's name was a little bit out there because he's American.
Right.
And we were saying, no, it's not the time. It's not whatever. And all of a sudden we thought, we have nothing to lose. He's dying. He's actually dying. Right. So that's when we said, fine, we'll take anyone who calls us. And until today, until right before you guys called, that's when, we've been, doing this. Right. And for whatever reason, it speaks to people, his story. And I think it's just simply that he really is everybody's kid. Everyone can picture someone who's like Hersh, if it's not their own kid or their nephew or their brother or, whoever it is, he's just this regular guy, So I think that why for the moment there's interest. I mean, we're not naive. We know that the way news cycles work is that, this will pass. He's the world to us. He's the most important thing in our universe, but we know that that's not going to be the case. So for now, we feel like if we can save his life, which to be honest, the Red Cross has been on the border trying to get in. Right. John speaks to them every day in London, in Geneva, here. They can't get in. Doctors Without Borders, they can't get in. So, I mean, we can't, there's a chance that he died 10 days ago. That we just don't know. And that's why we're in the twilight zone.
Go back to something that you said about Hersh being this guy that everyone can picture, can identify with, can imagine as their nephew or son or brother. Talk to us a little bit about Hersh, who he is, and give us a story about who this guy Hersh Goldberg-Polin is.
Well, I don't know many Jewish mothers who say, he's okay. I mean, so I think he's just, the best thing since sliced bread. But he's a really funny, witty, smart, voraciously well-read, curious, trivia knowledgeable, geography aficionado. He loves music. He's really comfortable with people of all ages. What made me feel really good is just in passing, just a few minutes ago before you guys arrived, I saw someone had just met him. Dina Kraft just met him on the first night of Sukkot. And she said when they left, he wasn't sitting near us. He was sitting more on the kids' side. Mm-hmm. That she said on the way home, her kids were talking to her about Hersh and how much they liked Hersh. And that she said, he's the kind of boy that I want my daughter to marry. And I thought, that's what's nice about Hersh is he's a sweet, kind, respectful guy. He doesn't take himself seriously. He's not super buttoned up. I mean, he's like this crunchy granola. He went
born in Berkeley, right?
He was. It's in his genes, and he just spent 9 weeks in Europe, traveling to 6 different music festivals. He went by himself with his teeny tiny backpack, with 2 shirts and 3 pair of underwear. And we were thinking, I really hope you wash those. He's just a good, decent person. The truth is he's a good, decent person. He's a very sympathetic person. And
yep,
I like him.
Yeah, one can understand why. So you've spoken to nearly every major news outlet, as we've discussed, list them, and you and John are on the cover of Time magazine this week, which is iconic and difficult to see because awful. Don't want to be on the cover of Time magazine for this reason. And as you've been describing, you were able to bring the Hersh story to the much wider public, to the international audience. And it's a responsibility in a sense. It is, because you are representing obviously Hersh and all the other 200 and something captives that we don't even know the exact number at this moment. And I imagine it's also something of a burden. And I'm wondering at this point, 12 days in, how that feels. Obviously, you're going to keep on doing it, but what does that feel like right now?
Well, it definitely feels terrible to be known in any way. I actually wrote something which I could read to you. I wrote yesterday morning when I was up, by 4 a.m, up for the day. And just, it was a extra hard morning for some reason. And I wrote something about like, I just want to be nobody again.
Yeah.
And part of the fun of being named Rachel Goldberg is that I was always nobody because I'm the Jane Doe of Jewish women. Like everybody knows Rachel Goldberg's, and so I always had this anonymity. And now to be known for such a horrible thing, which God willing, please, will have a good ending. But I mean, it's, so that alone, being known is awful. And also knowing that however this ends will be known for a long time is also awful. In terms of feeling a burden or a responsibility, I actually don't feel that. I feel like we are everybody.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't feel like I'm a representative for anyone. I actually think we all feel that. I feel every family that I speak to, they're all speaking to whoever they could speak to, and they feel the same. We just have a common mission.
Yeah.
And so that part is fine. But it's tragic to feel like I've lived my whole life, just being this like under the radar no one, and it's been completely fine with me. And now to be known for such a, horrible nightmare that we're going through is unfortunate.
To put it mildly.
Exactly.
So you've been logging these 20-hour days. I've read pieces where you talk about drinking your tea in the morning because probably coffee is not a good idea.
Not an option.
No, crying into a t-shirt and then getting to work. I think that was from People magazine, and it was a very potent image. But when you and John close the lights at night and do get into bed and do try to sleep, what happens then? What are you able to? Are you able to sleep?
Well, so thankfully we have right away. My family doctor called. He saw in the press somewhere, what
was
happened,
happening?
And he called and he said, "Okay, I have prescribed, whatever it is. I don't even know what it is." He said, "Have a friend go pick it up. And when you do finally get into bed at night, you take one of these and it will knock you out." And in theory, it's supposed to knock you out for about 8 hours. We both get up after about 3 hours. It must be the natural sleep cycle.
Right.
There's like a period where you could go deeper, and our inner, chemistry knows.
Doesn't allow you.
There's no time for that, And so we have just been, powering on. We have a job to do. And thank God we have this team around us who, when we're, getting weak in the knees, they pick us up. And that's the reason that we're functioning, period, is because of these people around us. And what I've so appreciated is that, first of all, I really appreciate that some of our dearest friends happen to be these talented, brilliant strategists who know much more than I do. But what has really been so beautiful and meaningful are people who I really just sort of tangentially know, or are really acquaintances who you say, "Hi, good Shabbos," or whatever, but you don't really know, who have come with their whole hearts, giving us 20-hour days. And again, first of all, they're not our friends. They're not getting paid. Like we're all, like they're doing this at the expense of them working. And they come in, they'll wave to me, and they sit down and they work, and then they leave. I mean, it's unbelievable.
And do it all over again the next day.
And that gives me a lot of strength.
Yeah.
And these WhatsApps, or emails that I get from people who I haven't, first of all, some of them I literally haven't seen since I was in kindergarten, but some of them will say, my cousin was in your 6th grade class. So it's not even someone I know. It's just someone saying, and I wrote an op-ed piece for New York Times, and the editors send us some of the comments that they've gotten where, this man wrote, I'm sitting in, I forget what the place in China was, in some city in China, and my 2 sons are asleep, and I have tears streaming down my cheeks, and and it's helpful. I don't know why, because I've always thought to myself when I hear, about some loss that someone's had, and I will reach out to people, but I always think this probably isn't really helping them, but I'm going to write anyway, 1 or 2 lines. I'm telling you, it's a life lesson for me. I don't get it, but it totally helps. It totally, totally helps. And I think part of it is that there's such an existential loneliness when you're in an indescribable pain.
Yeah.
That when other people are just saying, we can't imagine, but we're with you, that's enough. Because what I keep saying to people is, I also can't imagine it, and I'm in it.
Okay. We're going to wrap this up.
Okay.
One more question for you. You and John both said that in interviews that your video meeting, you met with President Biden on Friday, and it was supposed to be 20 minutes, and then it was going to be 40 minutes, and then it ended up being an hour and a half of President Biden meeting with all of the families of the missing who are U.S. citizens, who are dual nationals. And he said a lot of different things in that meeting. But what was one thing that stayed with you that maybe brought you strength and calm? Because he has said a lot of powerful things in the last days.
Well, something that happened in the meeting toward the end that was really painful and dramatic is that one of the women who was on the call, she was on the call sitting Shiva she had 2 daughters. One daughter, they had found the day before, so they had just buried her. So she was sitting Shiva, but she was in on the call because, her other daughter. And while we're on the call, and it's only 12 of us, so it's a pretty small Zoom call, and President Biden and a few of his, people
Staff.
in the administration who work with him. And she stood up at one point. Someone else was talking. He wanted to hear everyone's story. And she stood up and she went to the door of the room she was in. She was out for a minute, and she comes back in, and she's walking around, sort of throwing her arms in the air, and she hits something on her computer, which was the mute button, which all of us had our mute buttons on.
Right.
And she says, I have to interrupt. And the president was speaking at the time, and he said, yeah, go ahead. And she said, I just got the door knock that my other daughter is dead. And she started screaming. And we all, 12 of us, started crying on the call. And he put his hands in his head in his hands and started sobbing. And it was so powerful because we were so with her.
Yeah.
And what was really amazing is he wiped his eyes and he said, I'm telling you right now, I have lost 2 children. And I know right now you're in an unimaginable agony. But one day you are going to need to be strong for the rest of your family. So scream, and you can scream to me as much as you want. And if you need me to, I'll call you tomorrow and you can keep screaming at me. He said, but you're going to need to allow yourself to be there for your family. And I just thought it was just a real human moment. And I know that it's very Western and very American and very touchy-feely. But you know what? We've been in hell for 12 days now. And it was a moment, it was a whisper of somebody getting the pain. And that will always stay with me. No matter where you are, you could be, with all of this, I keep thinking it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Hindu or whatever. Like, this tragedy is so universal
Right.
in wrapping all of us in excruciating pain, that it's something I don't know that any of us will ever recover from, no matter what the ending is. These, again, I always say, I'm speaking to people whose grandmothers are there,
Right.
whose 2-year-old nephew is there, right? The twins who are 11 years old who are there, the 4-year-old Gingy whose picture is everywhere.
Right.
Like, this is not normal.
No, it is not normal. And we are hoping and praying for the safety of Hersh and of all the captives, and for the ongoing strength that you have to keep on going with this, to find the answers and to, God willing, bring them home.
Amen, amen.
Amen. If you have any comments about this podcast or any of our other podcasts, please drop us an email at podcasts@timesofisrael.com. We're glad you were here with us today. It's good to know that you're on the other side of the microphone. Be well, stay safe, and Shabbat Shalom.